Okay, so we're back again. Now it looks like I'm doing the same tutorial, but I'm not, because I'm actually doing it for WordPress this time. So last week I did a tutorial on how to utilize your own custom meter fields application within Shopify. And this one we're going to do the same type of tutorial, but we're going to do it for WordPress using the already installed advanced custom fields app that the Udesly conversion process installs. Now, why would we want to do this? So one of the big frustrations of when you're using Webflow is you hit this 30 custom fields limit. And as soon as you start to make anything remotely more advanced from a website, you're going to hit that limit pretty quickly. And so what we're going to do today is kind of basically go through creating this product features area on the website that we were kind of building. Now, obviously these tutorials aren't around the design. This is around kind of getting the functionality and everything to work and trying to explain it. Right, so this is a slightly more advanced tutorial again, but unfortunately there's no real way of getting around it. And what I'm going to try and do as well is just kind of go through the PHP code so I can actually show you why something needs to be done in a specific way, so that when you kind of presented with a challenge or a problem, then you have a little bit more of an understanding if you're not comfortable within the, kind of the PHP encoding environment. Now, yes, okay, fine, you're investing in Udesly and Webflow so that you don't have to do code, but it doesn't strip away from the fact that you do need some basic understanding if you're going to be doing this on a professional capacity. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go straight over to WordPress, and we're going to start just by creating some of the custom fields that are going to basically be used for these particular areas. We're going to make an assumption that all of the custom fields that we've created within the Webflow thing have been saturated. And if you're not sure where you would do them typically, is you would literally go into your cart, hit on products, and then if you scroll down, you'll see this thing called custom fields. Now you do, as I said before, you have 30 of them, 30. And that's basically the easiest way to create custom fields. But you do have a limit of 30, which if you start racking them up with titles, images, conditional formatting bits, whatever it is, you're going to hit that limit at some point. So this tutorial is how you get around that and create them natively in WordPress using the Advanced Custom Fields app, which you can kind of see here. Okay, so if you're wanting to do this normally, quite straightforward. If you don't know this before, you literally go in here, type whatever you want, and save. And then when you utilize that field within within your kind of your design, it will create that into WordPress. But we're going to pretend that we've hit this 30 limit, and we're going to do it completely using the ACF plugin. Okay, so what I have done here is just to kind of speed things up a bit. I've created just this product features grid, and all it really is just basically a grid with some different components, so an image, a heading, and a paragraph. And what I've done on these particular ones, so 2, 3, and 4, is I've gone and actually configured these things so you don't have to do them over and over again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how to create that for the first feature. So first things first, we're going to go over to WordPress and just configure the custom fields that we're going to need in order to get it to work. So here I am in the thing, and what I've done is I've created a specific field group called product features, and basically that just allows me to kind of set this up and kind of configure it so it goes up to it. So if I was to do that from scratch, all I'd be doing is literally hitting add to thingy. I'd give it some random title of whatever you wanted it to be. You'd need to kind of specify and set that it is going to be, for instance, with this one, it's going to be a post type equals product. And that will then assign this particular custom field to products. If you're doing a different post type, say for instance project, it would now be assigned to project, etc. So it's kind of straightforward. And then basically all you needed to do is you start adding fields, and you can go blah blah blah, that's that particular field, and you get this thing called a field name. So this is the important thing that we need in order to basically link up the Webflow code to the ACF, or Advanced Custom Fields field. So if I go out of here, I'm just going to leave that, and we're going to go into product features. I've already set these up, and I'm just going to kind of quickly click through and talk about them. So feature image 1 is, as you see, I've just literally called it feature image 1, and then I've got that field names. Now, because this is an image, when you go to field type, you choose image, relatively straightforward. The thing to remember though is you are given 3 return formats, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit later. And the reason why I'm using image array is because it gives us a image object. So, and what that means is you have things like your access to your alt text, the name of the file, the URL, the dimensions, and a whole other plethora of things that attach to that specific image. So, and what I'm talking about is when we go into something like the media and we click on something like here, we have these different things. I can say that this is alt text, caption, description. So all of those basically, if we utilize the object way, we are able to hook into that in the code and kind of utilize it in our theme, so we don't have to kind of create additional meter fields to service, say, something like the alt text. Okay, so we're gonna leave it in image array. I'm gonna show you how to do this image URL one as well, but I don't think it's the recommended way. It's just that kind of just from a general workflow, if you ever get stuck and you want to do just that and not have any of the other object data, then we'll do that. Okay, so that's it really. So the important thing is just labeling it, field name, you can kind of see that, that's the important one we need, and then just setting up the types of fields. So if we go out of here and we go into the title, it's relatively straightforward. All it is exactly the same. So feature title gives us that field name. I'm going to copy that one because we're going to use that one next. This one's specified as text, and if you were doing a long form, which the paragraph one would be, is you would set it a text area. You have number, URL, email, password, whatever it is, this is how you would basically configure it. So we're going to keep that as text, and that's it. And you can kind of fill in the rest of the character limits if you want to be a bit more restrictive and however you want, but for this time being, we're not going to bother. All right, so copy that one, and we head on back on over to our Webflow. Now, the thing is, what we need to do is we actually have to get this particular meter field, and this is where the tutorial last week differs from this week, and that's why there's 2 of them, because basically last week was all about how to get it and access it through liquid code, and now we're talking about how to do it in PHP, so they're 2 very different server-side scripting languages that we kind of need to know how to interface with in order to get this to work. Now, because we're using advanced custom fields, we need to utilize some of their core code and present that within our theme, well, in the custom attributes, in order to get the field. So quite easily enough is basically we need to use get field. We have this bracket, we have a little string, which is our unique identifier that we created kind of within this thingy here, which is that, and then close brackets, and we don't need this semicolon. But one thing to be important, the usage of these double quotation marks within this particular field doesn't convert properly when you do it through the Webflow side of things. So you kind of, instead of using the double quotations, just use the single ones. All right, so let's copy this, and we'll head on over to here. And now, if we create this, I'm just going to pop that there for the time being. So now we need a way of broadcasting this particular value. So whatever is stored in here, so we'll just kind of do those single quotes again. So this particular value, and we'll go get this title. So we'll copy that title, go back into here, and we put it there. So now we need a way of basically saying, okay, I want to show this and this particular value on the front end. And now you would think, okay, fine. If I was to put like PHP, it would do that. No, PHP is computational kind of code that you can run in the background in order to present something, and that comes in handy when we do the images. But we need to broadcast it, so echo. So it'll be PHP echo. And if you're wondering where I'm getting that, we go university scroll all the way down to the bottom and you'll see this thing called PHP elements. And if you go down to echo, you'll see here it says PHP echo, and then you enter in your code, which is pretty straightforward. And all it's doing is it's basically saying, here we go, so PHP echo, and I want to echo the date here, and then when it spits out the code, it puts it in this PHP kind of construct, which basically says this is a bit of PHP server code. You need to kind of think about this and reference the server. And it says here PHP, and then it's echoing, so broadcasting, because it echoes. And then it gives you the date and it will return something like that. So in our case in point, it will echo the meter field. So quite simply, so PHP, get the field, and then basically features title, job done. Okay, so for the paragraph, it's basically the same thing. All we need to do is let's just grab this, save, pop it into here. So PHP echo, and we just need to get that new field. So we'll just come into here, grab the paragraph, and then pop it in between those single inverted commas. All right, that's that. Now, images are a bit different, and basically what I was talking about earlier on when I was saying with these different image array, image URL, and image ID things is we need to present the data slightly differently. And now what we have to do is and this is what I was saying earlier on about how we have to understand some of the code in order to understand how we construct the Webflow custom attributes. All right, so if we look at kind of how a typical image would be loaded, we get a bit of code that looks like this. And now it's not scary, because all it's doing is it's basically saying that for this PHP element, I want to store a new variable. So the variable is defined with this little kind of the $, and then whatever name we want to call it, no spaces. So it could be like, for this one in particular, saying it's image1. And then we're using that same thing, that same get field. So we want to get the field of that feature image1. And what it's doing is it's saying, I'm starting up, I'm loading, and I'm going to go and grab the image object, which is that array thing that we talked about. And that image object, again, has all the data that we possibly need. URL, alt text, dimensions, name of the file, etc., etc., etc. So what we need to do is then it will go to the image HTML object, basically is what renders your image. So when we add a image to our Webflow page, when you look at the actual HTML, it spits out that image tag. But in order to kind of, for an image to work, we need to have a thing called source, which is src. And src is basically the URL of where that object or where that image exists, so that it knows to say, haha, here it is. And the same thing for alt text, which is basically why we're doing this array thing. So alt text, for people who don't know, is basically a SEO friendly kind of thing. It describes the image, but its main purpose is to help people who are blind. So it's very, very important to have, and that's why I recommend basically doing this image object way. Now, this is why we can't use the echo, the PHP and get it, because it won't render it, because it doesn't understand what it's trying to do. We need to present it in a very specific way. Right, so what we're going to do is basically create this construct, and things to note is this PHP is executing before the image tag, okay? And so what that means is basically as we go through and we create this, so let's do this first thing first and I'll talk as we go. So we want to create this piece of snippet, and basically all it is basically we need to create a PHP and then we need to create the variable. So what we'll do is we'll just copy this PHP. If you're not sure where I got that from, is again go into our helpful Udesly University, scroll down and you'll see just PHP. And again, PHP just creates some code that we can then reference later on. It doesn't broadcast because it's not echoing, but it's just basically says compute this. Okay. So we get PHP, go on over to our image, We'll add a custom attribute. We'll put PHP. So now we need to create that construct, and I'm going to put the code below so that you can kind of just grip it and rip it. But basically, all we need is we need to define the variable. So define the object that we're going to kind of store our information in, and then we're going to do the same thing with our get field. So here it is. So we need to have the $, because the $, defines the variable. Then we'll type in whatever we want, and this could be anything you wanted it to be. So it could be blah blah blah, whatever, and it will store it, or it could just be K or whatever you need it to be. But I'm just calling it image_1. You just can't have any spaces. And then equals, and then our get field, I'll open our brackets, the single things, and then copy and paste our name from the field again. So that one there. All right. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just copy that now. Again, it will be below if you need it. And we head back over to here and we place that there. Hit save. Okay, so that's the first step done. So that is basically, it will create this. Now the next thing you're going to say is, okay, now we need to do the image source, and let's do that. So basically we need to now do a HTML attribute, and if you saw last week's video, you'll kind of understand basically where I'm going with this. If not, I'm going to talk it through. So as I said, we basically need to put the URL into this the HTML and say your source is this particular string that we're going to pass from our newly defined variable. So what we need to do is, again, head on over to our Udesly thing, and you'll scroll down and you will see under advanced again, you'll see HTML elements. And basically all we're going to do is just grab HTML attribute, and it follows a specific pattern. So we have a thing called attribute name, and then the attribute value separated by this particular kind of bar. And then if you're stringing them, because you can put in as many attributes as you want really in this particular thing, as long as they're relevant and useful to you, you just put a semicolon and then you can repeat it again. Okay, so let's copy that, head back over to here, we'll add this, and we'll put an HTML attribute. Now, as I said before, we want to kind of do the source, and we want to make sure that we are doing, and we were kind of doing the alt text in the source. So I'm going to head back over to the code, and the reason why I do it in a code editor like Visual Studio Code is it just makes your life easier to kind of spot and see issues instead of kind of typing it in Webflow and then kind of praying that you've kind of typed it correctly, even though it's a very small box and you can't see everything. So all we need here is basically, we need to have the source, we need to have that bar, and then you need this thing, PHP. So it's the brackets and then the question mark in PHP. No spaces. If you do this, watch what happens. It goes white and it's wrong. So I know that that's wrong. Again, code editor is your friend. Looks scary, but it's not. Cool, so that's that. And now we can echo our image, because basically it's saying source, and now echo this particular variable that we created. And now we're using the square brackets, again our little kind of quotation marks, and then because we want to get the URL. So get the URL, all right? And then we close that, and that's that. The next thing we want to get is our alt text. So we need to remember that kind of pattern that we're following from a HTML attribute. So semicolon. Now we want to name it alt, because that's the naming convention for alt text. And then basically the same thing. So PHP echo image1, but instead of the URL, we're now getting the alt text. And that's it. So copy that, head back over, hit our save, and that's that. Now you think, yay, I'm done, because it's going to work. No, it's not. And you know why? Because basically what will happen is this particular code's going to run together. And so it's going to might get a bit confused about, okay, I need to store the variable first, then kind of catch the variable, or it's going to try and catch the variable before you've even thrown it. And so at some point it's going to break. And you need to make sure that we're following that very specific kind of code layout. So the PHP image is being stored, it's getting the image, it's storing it in a variable, and then we're running and we're doing the image in kind of in this particular regard. And you think, okay, well, why did you do it this way? Well, mostly because it's neater, and Udesly gives us a very helpful little tool, which we go into here again, and we can scroll down, and you see in the PHP elements we have where, so we can position that PHP or PHP echo where we want it beforehand or kind of after. We want it before. And now because we're using the HTML attribute, where we're then echoing our PHP within it, it's not going to affect that one. So the only one it's going to move is this particular PHP snippet. So let's just get that. So we go where. So add a new custom code. So where, and then we just need to, again, just grab before, unless you want to type before, and then hit save. Now you're done. So now, basically, those little attributes that we've created, and again, here's them on for screen. So we've now created this particular structure using kind of webflow. And you actually you don't need to go and manually change anything in the code once it's exported, which could get a bit scary. So we're now done. So now what we need to do is basically publish our site, just so kind of make sure that everything's up on the Udesly server. Okay, add our custom attributes, and then finally download, go through that conversion process, and install your theme. Okay, so now we've got the theme installed. We can head on over to our thing. I've configured some of the custom attributes beforehand because you don't really need to see me doing that. But basically what you'll see is we have the product features section that we created. And then within here, we've got our feature image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And with all of the nicely kind of easy to kind of understand things. And all of this is now editable. So if I was to kind of go a new title, yep. And then we go into here and we go say, fine, we're going to change this alt text to this is our new alt text. And we hit save. All right. And then we just basically update that. And let's have a look at our page. So let's go into here. All right. So we have all of our stuff that we've done previously. And if we scroll down, we can see that everything is coming across nicely. Okay, and if we go into here, if I inspect that, we can see that basically our alt text is coming across within the image. Cool. So now this little bit at the bottom here, I'm going to kind of rewind and show you how to do that. So basically, if you were to create that particular field, if you wanted to not, and you can see here, if I go into here, there's no alt text whatsoever. It's not there, so it's not the best way of doing it, but it is still working. But all we're having to do is basically simplify that code and basically just present the particular get object. But in order for that to work, we still have to do our custom attributes, but we only need to use the HTML attribute with the source and then the PHP echo PHP. So let's just take that. And you can see here we've got source, PHP echo, get the field, and then image object. The reason why it works here is if you remember those custom fields that we set, if I scroll down to this particular image object, which is non-object, it's set as an image URL. So, and that's the return format. So it's basically saying, okay, I know that you just want this coming out as a URL, and you don't want any other object information about that particular asset. So can be useful if you're needing just to do it and you're not going to have any alt text, then fine, and then you can kind of just do it that way, and it's relatively straightforward. The one thing I haven't addressed in this is source sets. So the way that the images scale depending on the kind of the dimensions of the page. So if you've got a mobile page, a kind of a hero kind of image that goes on a desktop, Though image sizes are going to be different based on that, and that kind of impacts your page speed. Now, because these are quite small, that's not a huge issue as long as we're authoring it the right size. But the thing that this is not doing is it's not adding that source set into it. Bit more advanced, and I'm probably going to cover this off in a separate tutorial because I think this is enough for now. But for the time being, if you need those source sets, if you're doing really big things, then it's best to reserve your product images through these custom fields and utilize those there for things that you need images, because they automatically get an applied source set to them on export. Alrighty, so that's the tutorial. Hopefully you found it interesting and kind of not too boring or too difficult. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And the reason being is because next I'm going to be doing a much requested tutorial that's going to be around getting filters and color options to work with Shopify. And it's one not to miss. Anyway, catch you later. Cheers.